preparing for a compliance officer at Bank of America interview. You've reached Candy Mentor, and this video is for you. We'll walk through 15 key questions you're likely to face. For each question, you'll see a sample answer, followed by the key points to cover. Subscribe, like and share, and drop a topic request in the comments. Question 1. Why do you want to work as a compliance officer at Bank of America? Bank of America appeals to me because compliance there is tied directly to responsible growth, not treated as a back-office checklist. I want to work in a large, complex institution where regulatory judgment affects customers, markets, and reputation every day. My strength is translating rules into practical controls and clear guidance. I would bring curiosity, discipline, and the confidence to escalate issues early while helping the business meet objectives responsibly. While answering, focus on Bank of America's responsible growth culture, your motivation for compliance, understanding of large bank complexity, and how you balance regulatory protection with practical partnership to the business. Question 2. How do you see the compliance officer's role within the 3 lines of defense? Compliance is the independent second line that helps the business understand obligations, designs risk-based guidance, and challenges decisions that could create regulatory or conduct risk. The first line owns the risk and executes controls. Internal audit provides independent assurance as the third line. In practice, I would advise early, document decisions, monitor outcomes, and escalate issues when risk exceeds appetite or customer fairness is at stake. Make sure to cover the 3 lines of defense: advisory versus independent challenge, control ownership, escalation, and how compliance protects customers, market integrity, and the firm's license to operate. Question 3. What AML or KYC red flags would you look for when reviewing a client or transaction? With AML KYC, I look for inconsistencies between the customer's profile and activity. A small importer suddenly receiving high-value wires from sanctioned adjacent jurisdictions would prompt enhanced due diligence, source of funds review, beneficial ownership checks, and potentially escalation to financial crimes compliance. I would not treat one alert as proof of wrongdoing. I would gather facts, compare against expected behavior, document my rationale, and ensure any SAR decision follows internal protocol. In your answer, talk about customer risk, transaction behavior versus expected activity, beneficial ownership, source of funds, sanctions exposure, escalation to financial crimes teams, and disciplined documentation. Question 4. What would you do if a senior business stakeholder pressured you to approve something you believed was high risk? When a senior stakeholder pressures me to approve something I believe is risky, I slow the process down and bring it back to policy, evidence, and escalation standards. I would explain the specific regulatory concern, offer compliant alternatives, and document the discussion. If the risk remains outside appetite, I would escalate through compliance leadership rather than compromise independence. That protects the firm, the customer, and the employee making the decision. Be sure to mention independence, respectful challenge, using policy and evidence, documenting the discussion, offering compliant alternatives, and escalating when business pressure conflicts with risk appetite or regulation. Question 5. How would you manage a new regulation that affects one of Bank of America's business lines? Regulatory change management starts with identifying the rule, assessing applicability, and translating it into impacted products, processes, controls, and owners. I would partner with legal, risk, operations, technology, and the business to define gaps and implementation dates. Then I would track remediation, update procedures and training, test readiness, and maintain evidence for examiners. The key is not just knowing the regulation, it is proving the organization can comply sustainably. While answering, focus on horizon scanning, applicability assessment, gap analysis, ownership, implementation tracking, training, testing, and evidence that would satisfy regulators or internal audit review. Question 6. How would you handle a potential OFAC sanction screening alert? An OFAC alert is not something I clear casually, because sanctions risk can create severe legal and reputational consequences. I would review the match quality, identifiers, geography, ownership links, transaction purpose, and any potential 50% rule concerns. If information is incomplete, I would seek more data and hold the activity if required. My decision would be documented clearly, with escalation to sanctions specialists for true or uncertain matches. Make sure to cover sanctions screening steps, false positives versus true matches, OFAC considerations, documentation, transaction holds where required, and escalation to sanctions specialists for uncertain or high-risk alerts. Question 7. How would you identify and manage a conflict of interest in a financial institution? Conflicts matter because clients must trust that advice, allocation, and execution are not influenced by personal or firm interests. If I identified a potential conflict, such as an employee outside business interest connected to a vendor, I would assess disclosure requirements, approval status, materiality, and mitigation. The answer might be recusal, restricted access, enhanced supervision, or prohibition. I would document the review and make sure the control is actually enforceable. In your answer, talk about why conflicts damage trust. Examples such as outside interests or client allocation, disclosure, recusal, restrictions, approvals, and monitoring that makes mitigation practical. Question 8. How would you design a compliance monitoring and testing plan? A strong monitoring and testing program starts with the risk assessment, not a generic checklist. I would identify key regulations, high-risk products, recent issues, complaints, and control changes. Then design tests that sample meaningful transactions. Findings should be rated by impact and root cause, with owners, deadlines, and validation steps. The best programs also feed lessons back into training, procedures, and business controls for lasting improvement. Be sure to mention risk-based planning, sampling, key controls, issue rating, root cause analysis, management action plans, validation, and how monitoring results improve policies and training. Question 9. What factors would you consider before escalating a case for a suspicious activity report? A SAR decision should be fact-based, timely, and handled with strict confidentiality. I would analyze the customer's expected activity, transaction pattern, source of funds, adverse media, and explanations received. If the activity remains suspicious after review, I would escalate to the AML investigations team, following policy, and preserve all evidence. I would never disclose a filing to the customer or relationship manager because tipping off risk undermines investigations and violates obligations. While answering, focus on fact gathering, suspicious activity indicators, escalation to AML investigations, SAR confidentiality, no tipping off, timelines, evidence preservation, and avoiding premature conclusions. Question 10. What would you do if you discovered that customer data had been shared improperly? In consumer and wealth businesses, privacy failures can harm customers quickly and attract regulatory scrutiny. If I saw customer data shared beyond need to know, I would verify the facts, stop further exposure if possible, and escalate to privacy, information security, and compliance leadership. I would assess whether breach notification, customer remediation, or control changes are required. The goal is fast containment, accurate reporting, and prevention of recurrence. Make sure to cover customer harm, data minimization, need-to-know access, incident escalation, breach assessment, regulatory notification, remediation, and coordination with privacy, security, legal, and compliance teams. Question 11. How do you explain a complex regulation to front office employees who need practical guidance? I avoid simply quoting regulations to front office teams. I translate the rule into what changes in their daily workflow, what information to collect, when to pause, what approvals are needed, and where judgment applies. I use examples because they expose gray areas faster than policy language. I also invite questions and document agreed guidance, so the business can move efficiently without creating hidden compliance exceptions. In your answer, talk about translating rules into business actions, using examples, clarifying gray areas, confirming understanding, documenting guidance, and maintaining independence while being approachable. Question 12. How do you prioritize multiple compliance deadlines, such as an examiner request, a high-risk alert, and a policy review? I triage by regulatory impact, customer harm, deadline certainty, and management visibility. If an examiner request, a high-risk alert, and routine policy review arrive together, I would confirm due dates, identify dependencies, and communicate capacity constraints early. I would handle time-sensitive regulatory items first, delegate or sequence lower-risk work, and keep stakeholders updated. Good prioritization is transparent, defensible, and tied to risk rather than whoever is loudest. Be sure to mention risk-based prioritization, regulatory deadlines, customer impact, examiner requests, transparent communication, delegation, stakeholder management, and documenting why certain items were sequenced first. Question 13. What does conduct risk mean to you? And how does it connect to Bank of America's responsible growth strategy? Conduct risk often appears before a technical rule is broken. I pay attention to incentive structures, complaint themes, sales pressure, exception trends, and whether employees feel safe escalating concerns. At Bank of America, I would connect this to responsible growth. Growth has to be sustainable, customer-focused, and within risk appetite. Compliance should challenge behavior that looks profitable today, but could damage trust tomorrow or violate expectations. While answering, focus on conduct risk indicators, incentives, complaints, escalation culture, responsible growth, customer trust, risk appetite, and why compliance should challenge profitable but inappropriate behavior. Question 14. Tell me about how you would handle a control weakness identified during a compliance review. When I find a control weakness, I first separate symptom from root cause. A misc review could be caused by unclear ownership, poor data, weak training, or an unrealistic process design. I would quantify impact, assess whether customers or regulators are affected, and agree a corrective action plan with accountable owners. Then, I would validate the fix independently, because closure should mean the risk is reduced, not just documented. Make sure to cover root cause, impact assessment, customer or regulatory exposure, corrective action ownership, deadlines, independent validation, and the difference between documenting closure and reducing risk. Question 15. Tell me about a mistake you made and what it taught you about compliance work. Early in my career, I learned that speed is not valuable if the rationale is weak. I once prepared an issue summary that described the finding but did not explain the root cause clearly enough. My manager challenged it, and I rebuilt the analysis with evidence, impact, and action owners. Since then, I use a simple standard. Would an auditor, regulator, or new teammate understand this decision later? In your answer, use a concise star structure. Admit a real improvement area. Show accountability. Explain what changed, and connect the lesson to compliance judgment and documentation quality. If you are still with us, congratulations, you are much ahead of the rest and serious about preparing for your interview. We hope we were able to add value to your preparation and create some helpful content. Do not forget to like and share this video. Your small act can do great things for us.